Saxon Algebra 1, Lesson 6. In this lesson, we will discuss rules for addition, adding more than two numbers, inserting parentheses mentally, and the definition of subtraction. If two numbers have the same absolute value, but are of opposite signs, then they cancel each other when added. For example, positive 5 and negative 5 add to 0. It's as though they annihilate each other when they come together. Drawing number line diagrams to add signed numbers is time-consuming, so we will establish rules to use instead. Our first rule is this. When two numbers have the same absolute value but different signs, their sum is 0. Another way to say this is a number plus its opposite is 0. In algebra, a plus the opposite of a is 0. Here are some examples. We just saw that 5 plus negative 5 is 0. Likewise, negative 7 plus the opposite of negative 7 is 0, which is equivalent to negative 7 plus 7 equals 0. And 2/3 plus negative 2/3 is 0. In the previous lesson, we saw that two negative numbers add to a bigger negative. It is also true that two positive numbers add to a bigger positive. For example, negative 2 plus negative 3 is negative 5. And positive 2 plus positive 3 is positive 5. We can state this as our second rule. Two numbers with the same sign add to a bigger number with that sign. In this context, bigger means their absolute values are bigger. More precisely, this rule says you add the absolute values of the numbers and give the sum the same sign as the numbers being added. For example, positive 7 and positive 10 is positive 17, and negative 7 and negative 10 add to negative 17. The two rules we established can be used to understand what happens when two numbers of opposite signs are added. First, consider the problem negative 3 plus positive 7. Positive 7 is the same as 4 plus 3, so negative 3 plus positive 7 is the same as negative 3 plus 4 plus 3. But negative 3 and 3 cancel each other, so we are left with 4. The answer to negative 3 plus positive 7 is the same as the answer to the subtraction problem 7 minus 3. Now consider the problem negative 7 plus positive 4. Since negative 7 is bigger in absolute value than positive 4, we will rewrite negative 7 as negative 4 plus negative 3. This time, -4 and +4 cancel. So we are left with -3. Again, we get the answer by subtracting, but this time it is a negative number. These examples suggest our third rule. To add two numbers with opposite signs, subtract their absolute values and give the answer the sign of the original number with the larger absolute value. For example, -6 and +2. We subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. Then, since -6 is bigger in absolute value than +2, the answer is negative. So we put -4. Let's look at this on the number line. The answer is -4. Another example, -5 plus +7. Again, we subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2, but this time the 7 is bigger in absolute value, so the answer is positive. And again, we see this on the number line. Time to test your understanding. See if you can think of the right answer to each of these before it is shown. +9 plus -5. The answer is +4 because the 9 is bigger than the -5 in absolute value. -21 plus +21. The answer is 0. They cancel each other. -8 plus -2. The answer is -10 because two negatives add to a bigger negative. -8 plus +2. The answer is -6 because the -8 is bigger in absolute value. -3 plus +7. The answer is +4 because the 7 is bigger in absolute value. -9 plus +2. The answer is -7 because the -9 is bigger in absolute value. -6 plus -6. The answer is -12 Two negatives add to a bigger negative. Positive 8 plus negative 8. The answer is 0, because they cancel each other. Adding more than two numbers. Signed numbers can be added in any order. This is the commutative property of addition. Since you can only add two at a time, it doesn't matter which two you start with. You could add them from left to right. For example, negative 5 plus 3 plus negative 1 plus 2. You could add the negative 5 and the positive 3, getting negative 2. And then you can add the negative 2 and the negative 1, getting negative 3. And finally, you add the negative 3 and the positive 2, and you get negative 1. Or you could first add the numbers with the same sign. In our previous example, we would add the negative numbers first. That's the negative 5 and the negative 1. They add to negative 6. Two negatives add to a bigger negative. Then we add the positive numbers, 3 and 2. They add to positive 5. Finally, you add the negative 6 and the positive 5, and that gives you negative 1. Subtraction. As we noted in a previous lesson, there are three meanings of the minus sign. Subtraction, as in 5 minus 2. Negative, as in negative 7. And opposite, as in minus x. When you have a variable and the minus sign is in front of it, it always means opposite. It doesn't mean the variable is negative. This can be a little confusing. So in algebra, we eliminate subtraction by defining it to be addition of opposites. In algebra, we write a minus b is equal to a plus the opposite of b. With this definition in mind, we can say, there is no subtraction in algebra. One thing to pay close attention to is what we mean by the opposite of a number. When a minus sign is in front of a letter or parentheses, it means the opposite of that number. For example, minus x does not mean negative x. Instead, minus x means the opposite of x. Likewise, minus parentheses 3 minus 7 does not mean negative 3 minus 7. Instead, it means the opposite of 3 minus 7. Since 3 minus 7 is equal to 3 plus negative 7, or negative 4, the opposite of 3 minus 7 is the opposite of negative 4, which happens to be positive 4. Inserting parentheses mentally. Most signed number problems are written without parentheses enclosing the signed numbers. In such cases, the sign preceding the number will designate whether the number is positive or negative, and if there is no sign, as in the first number being added, that number will be positive. We must also remember that there is no subtraction in algebra. So if the minus sign appears between two numbers, then we will mentally insert a plus sign before it, so the minus sign designates a negative number that is being added. For example, 4 minus 3 plus 2 should be thought of as 4 plus negative 3 plus 2. And negative 6 minus 3 minus 2 plus 5 should be thought of as negative 6 plus negative 3 plus negative 2 plus 5. Let's look at some problems. A. Negative 4 minus 7 plus 3 minus 5 plus 6. That's negative 4 plus negative 7 plus positive 3 plus negative 5 plus positive 6. We will add the negative numbers first. They add to negative 16. Then we will add the positive numbers. They add to positive 9. And finally, we will add negative 16 and positive 9, which gives us negative 7. B. 12 minus 7 minus 7 plus 3. We think of it as 12 plus negative 7 plus negative 7 plus positive 3. We add the positives. 12 and 3 is 15. And then we add the negatives. Negative 7 and negative 7 is negative 14. So we have 15 plus negative 14, and that is equal to 1. C. Ooh, this one looks confusing because of the absolute values. What do we have here? Negative absolute value negative 5 minus 2 minus absolute value of 3. We have to interpret those absolute values. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. So we have negative 5 there. And then we have minus 2. And the absolute value of 3, well, that's just 3. So we have minus 3 here. So what we really have is negative 5 minus 2 minus 3. Now we interpret that. That's negative 5 plus negative 2 plus negative 3, which is negative 10. You see, all these negatives add to a bigger negative. Well, this is the end of Lesson 6. Your assignment is Problem Set 6 on pages 32 and 33 of your book.